So would it be a good idea to start?
Sure. Yeah, I've just, I believe I've hit the record button. So,
Excellent.
good day to all, and welcome to this, the fourth in a series of occasional webinars offered by the Polish-American Historical Association. My name is Neil Pease. I have the honor to be the president of the Polish-American Historical Association, and my greetings and best wishes to all of our guests, both in the United States and from around the world. As I said, this is a series of webinars that we have undertaken this year, and they feature presentations from papers that were scheduled to be given at the annual meeting of Polish-American Historical Association that had to be canceled for reasons of the pandemic. And so to try to maintain our scholarly conversation through this year, we have instituted this series of webinars, and we welcome you to this one. And today we have a presentation by Mark Dillon and Geoffrey Gyrisco, and it's entitled "A Builder of Polish-American Identity, How Victor Cordella of Krakow Shaped Church Architecture in Minnesota." Now, the procedure will be as follows. I'm going to introduce the presenters, and at that point, they will take over. And at the end of their presentation, we will have a question and answer session. If you have questions, then I would invite you, please, to write them into the chat, and we will take them on as we get there. So without further ado, let me introduce our presenters for A Builder of Polish-American Identity, How Victor Cordella of Krakow Shaped Church Architecture in Minnesota.
Well, thank you, Dr. Pease, Dr. Mueller, and everyone at PAHA. Dr. Geoffrey Gyrisco of Madison, Wisconsin, and I are honored to present the story of architect Victor Cordella of Minnesota. Michael Retka of Little Falls, Minnesota, is unable to join us today due to an unexpected liturgical musical commitment, but the fruit of Michael's research will be well represented in our presentation. Michael is the director of music ministry at St. Edward's in Elmdale, Minnesota, a Cordella-designed church, and he plays piano and organ at several parishes. So let's get started. Originally from Krakow, Victor Cordella had a greater impact on the faith expression and identity of Poles in Minnesota than perhaps any other layperson of the early 20th century. So the collage that you see here are his major works from 1903 to 1930. More than 24 Polish, Slovak, Ukrainian, Carpathian Rusyns churches have one person in common, Victor Cordella. So Cordella worked across nationalities to build trust, to let his clients take the limelight and drive design. He avoided the self-promotion of his former boss, Cass Gilbert, who would go on from Minnesota to design the U.S. Supreme Court building in Washington. So who was this Roman Catholic guy with an Italian surname who got the commission for designing this Orthodox cathedral that you see, a church that would play a pivotal role in the development of the Orthodox Church in the U.S.? So Cordella's 1937 obituary revealed that he was Polish and from an arts-oriented family that appeared to have migrated to Poland from Italy during the Renaissance as Wawel Castle was being rebuilt. So initially, Geoffrey, Michael, and I found a small number of remarkable church designs for several Slavic congregations in Minnesota. Cordella had a personal modesty in both lifestyle and personality, and was sort of the antithesis of modern, somewhat egocentric design culture. We wanted to rediscover this important but humble man. And as we uncovered more, our interest grew, especially with the help of Mike's original research. So this presentation is a result of a team effort of Father Stanislaus Poshwa and Father Spencer Howe as well. Father Howe is the pastor of Holy Cross Church in Minneapolis, and he deserves special recognition for supporting the initial public awareness of Cordella. He hosted the first presentation about him in 2017 at the parish, and also raised funds to erect a new headstone for Cordella, as well as sponsor a bus tour of his works throughout Minnesota. So again, thank you, PAHA, for sponsoring this event. So some 25 years ago, our main speaker today, Dr. Gyrisco, discovered Cordella while researching Orthodox churches of the upper Midwest. He uncovered some of Cordella's major works for diverse groups, including Poles, and he was invited to give a paper at PAHA's 1996 meeting in Atlanta. That meeting resulted in an article in the journal Polish-American Studies in 1997. And for 20 years, the article gathered dust, and for Cordella, not much was done. Several years ago, in 2017, I saw Geoffrey's PAHA article, and it was kind of evident that the Minnesota Polish and Slavic communities have never really fully appreciated the full scope, impact, and diversity and uniqueness of Cordella's works. So we got together 2 articles in the Polish-American Journal and elsewhere, but then we began to work with Father Spencer Howe and others to present Cordella's work at a talk delivered by Dr. Gyrisco at Holy Cross. So Father Howe, who had once considered becoming an architect prior to entering the priesthood, fully supported a sharing of Cordella's story and to the broader community. And together with Father Stan, they organized the tour of Cordella's works in May 2019. And as you'll see in the slide here, that there was a parish-wide effort to provide a new marker for Cordella's grave at St. Mary's Cemetery, recognizing his importance. And so what you see here is one of his commercial works. By coincidence, we got the redeveloper of the former Nye's Polonais restaurant and bar in Minneapolis to showcase the original architectural elements of a tavern that Cordella first designed in 1907. And that's the signature Corinthian column that is a trademark of his design. Cordella also designed his own home and resided along the Bassett Creek Park on the outskirts of Minneapolis. So as I mentioned, Michael Retka conducted extensive research and put together the map here that you see here, which kind of plots all of Cordella's 27 churches. But Michael also found some additional works of Cordella, including schools, rectories, houses on Lake Minnetonka, and other small town churches, 27 in all. Cordella was a very busy architect, and he played a key role in creating the Polish Catholic landscape of central Minnesota. So here now, without further ado, comes Dr. Gyrisco from Madison, Wisconsin. He's an architectural historian with 30 years experience researching ethnic identity and immigrant church architecture across the United States.
Thank you, Mark. Is that good?
That's good.
Okay. Victor Cordella was born in 1872 in Krakow into an Italian-Polish family engaged in the arts. His father, Marian, was from an Italian-Polish family in Venice, and he was a sculptor. His mother, Florentina, was from the prominent and prosperous Krakow Grigaszewski family of minor Polish nobility. She too was an artist. Victor got an excellent professional education at the Academy of Fine Arts in Krakow, followed by studies at Lviv Polytechnic. In 1893, Cordella immigrated to the United States, joining his uncle Frank Grigaszewski, or Frank Griga as he's widely known in America, a successful businessman, a founding father and national leader of the PNA. Cordella began his architectural training in the offices of the ambitious Cass Gilbert. Gilbert designed the Minnesota State Capitol and later the Woolworth Building in New York and the US Supreme Court Building, among many prominent buildings. Cordella worked in the offices of several other architects before forming a partnership with Minneapolis native Christopher Bohm in 1902. The following year, Cordella's brother Valerian, an interior designer, joined them in the business. The same year, Cordella formed his first business partnership. He formed a personal partnership, marrying Ruth Mazer, a native of Ohio. In 1918, he married again to Minnie Beckwith, also from Ohio. In later life, they made their home in this modest house of his design. And behind the house is the beautiful setting on Bassett Creek. While Cordella was becoming established professionally and personally, he was becoming established within the Polish Roman Catholic Church and the Polish community. One of the first things Cordella did upon arrival in Minneapolis was to introduce himself to a Polish priest, and he was an active member of a leading Polish parish, Holy Cross. In the community, he helped publishing houses, and in the 1920s, at the height of his career, he organized special events, such as a concert by Paderewski following Paderewski's presidency. Cordella's churches are his most notable work. However, Cordella and Bohm also designed many commercial buildings, including the elegant Beaux-Arts Gluck Brewing Company building, the large Grainbelt Brewery, and Nye's Bar. Such bars are the center of Polish-American life. The firm also designed various residential structures, the most significant of which was the Turnblad Mansion, built for a Swedish newspaper magnate. The exterior is like a scrapbook of their European travels. The house, rather large for a family of three, was designed to be the home of the American-Swedish Institute. On the interior, Cordella worked into design a collection of Swedish stoves, an example of ethnic identity expressed in architecture. 1905 was Cordella and Bohm's big breakout year for their business, with the construction of two major churches, St. Casimir's Roman Catholic Church in St. Paul and St. Mary's Russian Orthodox Church in Minneapolis. In the 1880s, a group of Greek Catholic Rusyns left Holy Cross, Polish Roman Catholic parish, and constructed St. Mary's Church one small block away. Two young men of the parish led the construction project. As with Polish congregations, although newly arrived in America, they did not follow the log building traditions of rural Europe. They used a plan from American pattern book, balloon frame construction, and factory-made Gothic windows. The Greek Catholic bishop in Prešov sent the impoverished congregation as its first priest, the diocesan chancellor, dean of the seminary, the formidable Father Alexis Toth. Shortly after arriving, Father Toth clashed with the equally formidable Archbishop of St. Paul, John Ireland. Ireland was an Americanist, intent on making Roman Catholics fit into Protestant-dominated America. He strongly opposed the establishment of the Greek Catholic rite in America. Since the congregation owned the building, they and Father Toth could ignore Ireland. The bishop in Prešov largely ignored them, and ultimately they joined the Russian Orthodox Church under the bishop in San Francisco. In time, Father Toth led the conversion of a large number of parishes from the Greek Catholic Church to the Russian Orthodox Church, greatly expanding the Orthodox Church beyond its traditional reach of the native peoples of Russian Alaska and a few merchants and diplomats in a few coastal cities. The vast multi-ethnic diocese became the largest diocese of the Russian Orthodox Church, stretching from the Arctic to the Gulf of Mexico, from the Aleutians to New York. And St. Mary's was a pivotal parish. After Father Toth, the priests came from Russia, along with financial support and gifts from Russia, and they promoted the Russian language. The Orthodox seminary for the Americas was constructed across the street, apparently also designed by Cordella and Bohm. From a Roman Catholic perspective, these may seem like rather humble buildings. However, the St. Mary's Cathedral is still one of 5 of the largest Orthodox churches in the entire 5-state region of the Upper Midwest. And this small seminary building, although smaller than most Catholic parochial schools, was the seminary, the first seminary for the Orthodox Church in the Americas, and a major accomplishment at the time. To express this new Russian identity, Cordella designed a Russian church with multiple domes and a tower drawn up into a flame. The design was based on St. Nicholas Cathedral in Omsk, in Russian Siberia, 1,000 miles from the region of origin of the parishioners. On the interior was an iconostas from Russia. To express the importance of light in Orthodox Christianity, here we can see that Cordella experimented with a novel technology, the electric light bulb. Rusyns arriving later were uncomfortable with the Russian veneer of St. Mary's and desired to remain Greek Catholic. They bought an old wooden church from Holy Cross, Polish Catholic parish, moved it a few blocks, and established St. John the Baptist Greek Catholic Church, now called Byzantine Catholic. When they were ready to build a permanent church, Cordella designed a church expressing their blend of Orthodox and Roman Catholic traditions. Another group of Greek Catholics arriving from the eastern side of the Carpathians, following the spread of Ukrainian national consciousness, first joined St. John's Church. There they discovered differences that they had not noticed in Europe. So they formed St. Constantine's Ukrainian Catholic Church. And for them, Cordella designed a church using a form for Ukrainian churches that had developed in Western Canada. The Baroque towers, sometimes referred to as Cossack Baroque, are a symbol of Ukraine's last great period of independence. Cordella also designed 2 Greek Orthodox churches. For this one, St. Mary's, he used the design of the transept ends at St. Mary's Russian Orthodox Church, but employed a helmet-shaped central dome, distinctive to churches in the Balkans, creating a church of different character from St. Mary's Russian Orthodox Church. A few blocks from Holy Cross, Cordella designed St. Cyril and Methodius Church for Slovak Roman Catholics. Cordella used an identical design for Polish St. Francis Xavier in Buffalo, Minnesota. The lower part is Zapstil, the equivalent of the Federal style in America, a neoclassical style characterized by low relief and spare detailing. In contrast, the upper part is incongruous, overscaled, high relief Baroque flourish. It may reflect the secessionist style in East Central Europe, particularly in the vibrant growing city of Budapest, where Art Nouveau took the form of exuberant, over-the-top neoclassicism. The intent may have been fashionable big city architecture. The chunky proportions of the first rural Polish churches are a hint of rural European traditions, such as the first St. Peter's Church in Delano. Many of the well-known elaborate log churches of the Carpathians are Byzantine Catholic or Orthodox. So for a better comparison is this example of a rural Roman Catholic church from Pomerania. When the congregations rebuilt in brick and stone, the Poles and other Slavs discarded any hint of peasant life and rural church architecture. They wanted the architecture of the cities and the nation's elite. It may have been an effort to counter the suppression of Poland in Europe and the marginal social and economic status of Poles and other Slavs in America. Interestingly, most of the churches Cordella designed for diverse Slavic congregations in Minneapolis were remarkably close together, all with an easy walk of each other. The other major aspect of Cordella's work for religious organizations and churches is part of the Polish Catholic landscape of central Minnesota, the small towns and farmlands. Cordella designed at least 27 churches, with 4 more suspected of being his work, most of these in small communities. Cordella designed several parochial schools, centers of Polish-American life, as well as an orphanage in St. Cloud and St. Clair's Monastery, shown here. Turning to his Polish Roman Catholic churches, along with St. Mary's, Cordella's other major project of 1905, his first major Polish Catholic church, was St. Casimir's in St. Paul. The congregation was primarily Poles from Galicia. Here we have St. Casimir's on the left with its original tower, along with European examples on the right. On either side of the gable with large Baroque volutes were a pair of very tall towers with a multi-stage composition, features of Polish Baroque. The small open lantern resting on a dome at the top was a distinctive feature of German and Polish architecture. On the interior is a large central barrel vault with vaulted side aisles, a plan favorite for many of Cordella's Polish churches and for which there are many precedents in Poland. For Our Lady of Lourdes in Little Falls, Cordella reused much of the design of St. Casimir's on the exterior and interior. The design was predominantly Baroque with elements of the Renaissance. Baroque architecture, especially the rich, curving Italian-style Baroque, as we see here at the Church of St. Anne, Krakow, the finest example of Baroque church architecture in Poland, was associated with the Catholic Reformation, the resurgence of Roman Catholicism, and the height of the Polish kingdom, when Poland was the largest state in Europe. It is favored by Polish congregations in America. The exuberant and often ornate combination of Baroque and Renaissance styles has been dubbed the Polish Cathedral Style in the United States. At Our Lady of Lourdes, the height of the towers was pared down from those at St. Casimir's, perhaps more suitable to the Minnesota climate, and again they're connected with a great shaped gable. The interior again has a central barrel vault and side aisles, with the barrel vaults at right angles to the central vault, giving the interior a sense of motion, characteristic of Baroque architecture, and much beloved by Polish congregations. The altar, framed by 3 columns on either side, joined by a pair of large volutes, is an effort to bring the rich Baroque interior to America. In the inset, we can see that it resembles the altar of Church of St. Anne's in Krakow. And remember, Cordella came from Krakow and studied at Krakow, so he'd certainly been familiar with the church. At Our Lady of Lourdes, we know something of the design process. The building committee visited St. Francis Xavier Church in Buffalo, shown earlier, and St. Joseph's Church in Browerville, which we'll see in a moment, before they hired Cordella. Apparently, the relationship was close and warm, as Cordella donated one of the large windows in the nave, depicting the angel Gabriel, the angel of peace. In nearby Browerville, where the congregation of the previous church visited before hiring Cordella, in 1907, Cordella designed St. Joseph's, a church for a congregation primarily of Silesian Poles, again with heavy elements of Baroque architecture. Here also, we know something of the design process. Cordella found a patron in Father Guzdek, a fellow immigrant from the Austrian partition of Poland, who had studied philosophy in Krakow. Father Guzdek wanted a church in what he called the modern Renaissance style. He opposed boxy churches and opposed proposed economy measures that would have spoiled Cordella's well-proportioned design. The monumental tower is especially significant when we compare it to the tower of Wawel Cathedral in Krakow. St. Joseph's is on the left, Wawel Cathedral on the right, and we see many of the same design elements. The similarity could be coincidence, but that is unlikely. The The Lviv Cathedral Church Tower is the most, pardon me. The similarity could be coincidence, but that is unlikely. The Lviv Cathedral Church Tower is the most significant church tower in all of Poland. The church, a place of nationalist pilgrimage in the partition Poland of the time. The tower's message, with the Polish eagle on the side, may have been directed as much internally as externally. Within America's Polonia, there was a nationalist effort, in part conducted through the churches, to establish a national Polish identity that transcended the regional identity, which may have been primary for some immigrant Poles. Again, on the magnificent interior, there's the barrel-vaulted nave and side aisles with, with short transepts, design giving a Baroque sense of movement. 6 years later, Cordella refined the design for St. Peter's Church in Dillon. For small towns in the Roman Catholic heartland of central Minnesota, Cordella designed numerous churches. Designs use the same vocabulary as we can see here, but are scaled down to fit the size of the congregation and the budget. Here, the oversized Baroque broken pediment on the front says Roman Catholic. On the interior of St. Mary of Czestochowa in Delano, again there is the barrel vault, but the side aisles supported by Corinthian columns have been simplified to mere pilasters attached to the wall, supporting the ribs of the main vault. Oops, sorry. Here's the pilasters instead of the full freestanding columns. In 1926, for Our Lady of the Angels and Sauk Center, for unknown reasons, Cordella made the one major change in his design vocabulary of his lengthy career, adopting the Romanesque style. The overall design, however, he reused a few of his old favorite design elements, but overall the design conveys the solidity and simplicity of the Romanesque style, especially on the interior. Cordella's last major work in 1930 was Saints Peter and Paul in Gilman. The exterior is a blend of Romanesque, Baroque, and Beaux-Arts style. In short, the Polish cathedral style. The small crossroads 300-person hamlet of Gilman and the church that seated 700 were at the center of a large, intentionally created rural Polish settlement. The crowning achievement of Cordella's career was the design of Holy Cross, Minneapolis in 1927. The parish was, and still is, home for repeated waves of Polish immigrants. The complex design required marrying the solid and massive Romanesque exterior, broken only by small windows, with the light, airy Renaissance interior. The interior conveys a sense of studied stillness, in contrast to the sense of movement conveyed by an undulating series of vaults in Cordella's earlier Baroque designs. The Romanesque exterior was more conventionally American. However, the interior continues the traditional ornate grandeur of the Polish cathedral style, a witness to the splendor of Catholicism. In these churches, we can see how immigrant Poles appropriated the architectural symbols of the Polish elite. They claimed the tower of the Church of the Kings of Poland as the tower of their parish church. In this process, the symbols of the Polish elite became Polish-American symbols. In understanding Cordella's place within the field of architecture, it is useful to regard art and architectural design as a conversation, such as a professional meeting. The conversation drives the design process. Who is part of the conversation matters. To illustrate the point, with a bit of humor, consider two buildings side by side in Little Falls, Minnesota. On the left is Our Lady of Lourdes Church, designed in 1922 by Cordella. And on the right is the Antlers Hotel, designed in 1885 by Cordella's first mentor in America, Cass Gilbert. Gilbert was a man on the make, one of the first celebrity architects. He couldn't leave the backwater of St. Paul for New York City fast enough. His career included designs of 3 state capitals, the Woolworth Building in New York, U.S. Supreme Court Building, and many major commercial structures and public buildings, coast to coast. He served as president of the American Institute of Architects and was on the committee overseeing the design of Rockefeller Center in New York. Near the beginning of his career, he designed the upscale Antlers Hotel in the shingle style and submitted his drawings for publication in the periodical American Architect in 1885. The work was his contribution to a conversation among leading East Coast and British architects designing for the nation's elites. The conversation was about developing an innovative form of architectural design, one that was not derived from any historical precedents. The Antlers Hotel was Gilbert's contribution to this conversation. He made sure that his work in remote Little Falls, Minnesota was noticed on the East Coast and beyond. Cordella was part of an entirely different conversation from that of Gilbert, with his client communities, not other prominent architects. Cordella did not publish a single design. His clients were not interested in innovative design, though in retrospect, we can see that his work was socially and culturally innovative. They wanted designs that reflected their design preferences, that were expressions of their ethnic and religious identity, and that reflected their social and economic aspirations. Above all, they were interested in building a temple to God, such that when someone entered, they would bend their knee and exclaim, "This is the house of the Lord." The story of Victor Cordella has moved from the realm of scholarly conference and journal to a much larger stage. With revived interest in Cordella, his churches have gained a certain cachet. The survival of Cordella's churches is a miracle. Of the 27 known churches, only 3 have been demolished, 2 to make way for a larger church on the same site. One has become an art center for the community. All the rest remain in regular use by the congregations that built them. When people emotionally engaged with history and embrace their historic buildings, they remain a living part of the community and receive the daily maintenance and care that assures their survival for the future. Take it away, Mark.
Thank you, Dr. Gyrisco. We again regret that Michael Retka can't be with us, but I would like to mention that Father Stan self-published a limited edition book about Cordella in 2019 entitled Timeless Beauty in Architecture. And Father Stan, who is now in St. Agatha in St. Louis, has authorized the publication of a 2nd edition. And feel free to contact me for further information about that. One thing I would like to say in closing is that it was a joy to meet so many folks in so many places who are emotionally and financially committed to the upkeep of the many churches and other structures that Cordella designed. His designs reflected the hopes, dreams, memories, and connections with our Polish past. As Geoffrey mentioned, his buildings are living parts of the communities that they serve. When a church is closed or merged, it kind of is a death in the family. There are places where couples are united, our dead are honored, our babies are baptized. It is where meetings are held, where culture is nurtured, and where community is fostered. So, like those who rest in our cemetery here in the US, I feel our Polish churches deserve perpetual care. And the story of who built them is history worth remembering. So Geoffrey and I will now take questions from the audience. And I see we have one from asking more about Frank G, Cordella's uncle, and if we have anything more about his connection with him. Geoffrey?
Yes. Excuse me. Franciszek Grigaszewski, or Frank Grigla, as he simplified his name in America. The best information, the one source I recommend, is looking up his name under his Polish name in the Polish language version of Wikipedia. There's at least a short, fairly substantial brief bio of him. A fascinating man. He must have come as a fairly well-off person. And he initially went to Chicago, Milwaukee, and someplace in Indiana before arriving in the Twin Cities. And then he was, one of the founders, one of the founding fathers of PNA. He was the censor, a prominent role in the PNA for many years. He also owned 2 newspapers, Polish newspapers in America at various times. And then his later career gets even more interesting. He spent time in Russian Alaska, where he helped protect the interests of the native peoples of Alaska. And from there, he went on as a land agent to New Mexico, where he was an advocate for the preservation of the monumental archaeological sites left by the Native Americans there, and was eventually passed away and is buried in Santa Fe, New Mexico. A fascinating man. Well worth a study and well worth further pursuing.
We got a question. There was actually a fire recently, and one of Cordella's non-church works, a orphanage in St. Cloud, that he designed the whole complex there. But this actually is about a week and a half ago. There was a fire there, and the administration building burned. So this question comes from Anna Kirschman. Yes, this was an orphanage, not particularly a Polish one, but it was sold about a year ago by the Diocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis. The proceeds going to as part of the abuse settlement distribution. But that there are pictures of that in St. Cloud, of that facility as it originally was in 1924, I believe he built that. One additional question is just, was there anything particularly about Cordella's personality or his style of design that allowed him to work to all these competing nationalities and negotiate the terrain?
That's a great question. We really have virtually no first-hand account of who he was as a person. So we have to kind of infer who he was like, who he was. So it is amazing, because all these congregations were kind of, if not exactly competing, where one broke off from another, and then one broke off from another, one broke off from another. Clearly he was the rainmaker of the firm. He was the one who brought in the business, and clearly had a credible ability to move between all these communities. He must have been a delightful social personality to be able to handle that so skillfully. Clearly he knew Polish, but since he spent a year or two in Lviv, or Lviv as the Ukrainians would have it, there's a possibility he also knew the Russian language, Slovak, or Ukrainian, or so at least had some familiarity with those cultures. But it is extraordinary how he was able to move between all that. And it's who he was as a person, clearly. Very few other people have been able to do that.
We have an additional question here. Okay, the question, who else did Cordella work with other than Cass, Gilbert, and Boehm? Did he have other architects that he was involved in?
I don't recall the names offhand. They're in the journal article.
There is a question about did he work with decorators or painters or other designers?
The other member, Valerian, who was his brother, joined them in the firm, and he was an interior interior designer. Unfortunately, I can't totally trace it, but a painting by Cordella turned up, And clearly he had a very good, that's the only other, another piece we know, a beautiful watercolor, a typical genre of the log cabin in the clearing, very popular in the United States, except the house shows a rural Polish house in the clearing. And it has his signature on it, and it's descended from a Polish-American family in the adjacent area of Wisconsin, but that's about all I know. Yeah, we don't have information on who did the interior decorating. Must be a very big part of the job. Currently, we don't have the information.
Yeah, I think Geoffrey, you mentioned that Cordella himself donated one of the windows in the Little Falls. And I think in the Slovak parish, those are individual families who donated the stained glass windows in the oratories. But I believe in a lot of parishes that was left up to the pastor. One of the interesting things is that there was a wide variation of the budget. For example, at St. Cyril's and Methodius, there was a rather large budget. But the church being built in 1917, a few years after, it was a major recession in the area, 1919, 1920. And there are some surviving correspondence about the debt burden that occurred as a result of the expenses of the church. Let's see. So we have an additional question on the separation of Rusyns from Holy Cross, and I guess the degree to which other parishes or there, some parishes may have splintered into other groups. Are there any sources on that? To some extent, newspaper articles. I don't know if anything you've seen, Geoffrey.
I'm just relying on secondary accounts. In fact, it's a little more, there's a bit of complexity there because the dates from various accounts don't quite mesh. So that's that I've seen. So I sort of slid over that today. But yeah, exactly how they broke off. And it's interesting too how the people who founded St. Mary's Russian Orthodox Church eventually, they were really new to the country. And the people and the two men who oversaw it, one was I think 21, one was 18, who oversaw the construction, very young. And so one of the things that occurred to me, how did they know that in America you could buy a lot? You went to how you could go and just get a building permit for a small fee, form a corporation and gather money, and you don't need much in the way of permissions. So how did they know all that? I wonder, was some friendly Pole been there much longer, give them a hand, some Episcopalian or Presbyterian help them with the process? That's really interesting. What was the rest? I don't know if I'm answering the question quite, but.
Yeah, we did get a general question. Does Cordella's archive survive? And the answer generally is only in bits and pieces. I mean, he did not leave his personal papers or complete set of his drawings. It really is at the parish level. And I think one thing that Michael Retka found was that some of the surviving bits of his legacy are in construction journals and in and stuff outside the parish that documented his work.
The Northwest Architectural Archives, which is maintained by the University of Minnesota, has a very thin file on him. It's just, and also in conjunction with that, the other source that was really initially very helpful is the Immigration History Center, very renowned. Probably many people of you know that, and that has lots of these special event books saved, which give a bit of the history of the parish. But there's very little. Michael Retka also went to contacted the American Institute of Architects in their office in Washington, D.C., and they had a few more papers, but the file is very thin. It only has at the Northwest Architectural Archives, it has just half a dozen pieces of papers, all it's in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the sort of the sadder chapters is toward the end of his career. The commissioned work was fairly thin, and there is some documentation of the American Institute of Architects. They delisted him as a member because he didn't pay his dues. Geoffrey, you had found some.
He was one of the architects who couldn't pay his dues. He was not the only one. A good many were in the same boat. And last year of his life, it seems that he was working as a laborer to just have enough food to eat. It was really rough at the end.
Yeah, remember, this is the mid 30s, 1930s depression, and he did not get a major work after the Gilman Church in 1930. And so we have a question about Nyes. I'll read the question here. Is looking back at the development of the new apartments above Nyes in Minneapolis, were either of you instrumental in the preservation of part of Nyes, and what are your impression of the outcome of incorporating the original Nyes? Well, I did make a few phone calls, and while I can't really document it, I think the developers did redesign their project to some extent. There are a lot of public hearings about that. Personally, I think it's really an improvement in the design, especially with the bars that you see it as it originally was in 1907. There were a lot of the Nyes Polonaise, as much as it was as a symbol of a certain element of Polish culture. Architecturally, it was not not the best treatment of the original structure.
I'll offer an opinion too on that from a historic preservation perspective after 40 years in the field. It's that type of preservation project is always a compromise. So they made a real effort not to overwhelm the original historic building with their new construction, but the only way you can, because of the value of land there, inevitably you're going to have large buildings and the space is so valuable. So although they did their best to make the original historic structures stand out, it's always not perfect arrangement. Not for perfect solution. That's where that.
We have another question. Did Cordella have any children or relatives who might have his papers? They did not have any children. He had two wives, and as far as we can tell, there were no children from either marriage. I mean, they were kind of an unusual couple in that. Cordella's second wife, Mimi, was Protestant, and they married in a Protestant church, which I thought was kind of interesting given his own background. As far as other relatives who might have his papers, we have not been able to find any.
Because they passed away so long ago, and because there's a lot of mixing, population is constantly moving in big cities, it's a little bit hard to find. I can't imagine. There must be pictures of him engaging with in other community activities. We just haven't seen even a single photo, or engaging with his neighbors and that type of thing. There must be more information, but it's so long ago, and tracking anything down, we have not found a single thing.
Yeah, probably the most interesting photo is him in the studio of Cass Gilbert, where he's got the basement of the Minnesota Capitol building in the foreground. He was, I guess, at an intern level at the time, but he's right in the group photo there.
Yeah, where's he?
That is early on in the studio of Cass Gilbert. There you go.
There, yes, Cass Gilbert. Yes, yeah. Cordella's there with the looking like a young man with his hair parted to the center where the arrow points. Very center here between the at the corner of the drafting table is Cass Gilbert himself. The drawing in the foreground appears to be the basement level of the Capitol.
Let's see. So I think are there any? If there are no further questions, did you have any final thoughts, Geoffrey?
No, it's been a pleasure to make this presentation.
Okay.
Neil P's here.
Uh,
I actually have a couple of questions
Okay.
myself, and conveying one that was sent to me privately in the chat. My own question, I was intrigued by the interplay regarding the controversies between Latin Catholics and Greek Catholics and Orthodox, and I'm sure there's great stories there. But I had a similar question, which was simply, apart from the politics of it, apart from the intrigue or the rivalries between confessions, from an architectural or artistic point of view, is it common for an ecclesiastical architect to design churches of these different traditions? Or is this just quite unusual?
I don't know the answer to that. The only part I can say is from somebody's researched Orthodox churches. In most cases, we don't even know who the architect is. And even going out, we don't know who the architect is. And that's a major project to track that down, never mind connect the whole body of works by a particular person.
That's a good
Neil,
point.
to your question, I'm not sure how common it is in the Polish community, but in the New York area, in the Czech community, there was a famous Czech Jewish architect, Leopold Eidlitz, who did Protestant churches as well as Jewish synagogue. I think one of the first major Jewish synagogues in New York. So I don't know if there are other people like Cordella in the Polish community, but in other ethnicities, there are some examples of cross-cultural cooperation. Actually, I think Idlitz had gotten a lot of criticism because he had designed a synagogue that had Christian design elements in it in New York.
It was a very, very good question, though.
I see another question has arrived in the chat. I think this may have been touched on briefly in the presentation, but the question is, did Cordella design any houses, private residence, and if so, do they remain?
Yes. You want to take it, Mark?
There's this one on Lake Minnetonka. There is another kind of a duplex in Minneapolis. Of course, the Turnblad Mansion was originally a house. This was not his main area of interest. There are a few surviving structures. Probably, obviously, the Turnblad Mansion is the most significant. Probably the Lake Minnetonka house is a good second example. There was actually an article in the Star Tribune of someone who owns one of Cordella's houses in Minneapolis a few years ago. We could probably dig that up for you. And there is his own house on Bassett Creek. Unfortunately, that is it's a duplex and it's a rental, and it's probably not in pristine shape, even though the location is quite good.
Yeah, I've seen a passing reference somewhere to a couple more they did too, but they were not. Cordella and Bohm seem to be more commercial and institutional architects. And they also designed things like firehouses. And there's quite a few other public buildings that we didn't refer to here, such as firehouses and the like as well.
A really fundamental, pardon me,
Oh yeah, that within Father Pushwa's book, he's probably more than any other spot has documented some of the non-liturgical sites, such as the firehouse on 27th Avenue in Minneapolis, as well as a commercial building. He also designed the James Hosmer Library in Minneapolis, which is 36th Street.
Really fundamental question, and many of our audience probably know the answer quite well, but it might be of interest to some in the audience. What drew Polish and East European immigrants to Minnesota in the first place?
There's probably better people better qualified to answer that than me. I'll just take initial stab. One thing that was, it was at a time when really the whole United States was undergoing an industrial revolution, and one of the major industries actually, and the Twin Cities was really expanding. It was on a key intersection of the Mississippi River and the railroad network. And one of the things that really, one of the major industries was, of course, grain milling. It's still, the General Mills, I think, has a huge plant there still. So a lot of the grain from the was passing through that way as well. So it's just an expanding industrial city and lots of opportunity for people with minimal skills, but also for business people like Frank Grilla found, you know, he's a businessman and found lots of opportunity there as well. But also that was the time too in the early 20th century when at least the more somewhat more remote areas of Wisconsin, Minnesota were being settled. There was farmland available. So we see a development of rural Polish settlements, both in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So that drew people there too, as cheap farmland was available. And there was in Minnesota, there was Frank Grilla was involved with efforts to settle Poles in particular communities in rural areas. So that's some of the things that were drawing people there.
Yeah, on an industrial basis, probably the single biggest industry would have been lumber, and this was what drove a lot of the development of the Winona area. In fact, the Polish Museum in Minnesota is in the what used to be the office of a lumber factory.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat. However, I will mention that our esteemed colleague from Krakow, Professor Prosiłowicz, asks if if you would be willing to share the presentation upon upon request.
Sure.
Should people who are interested simply contact you and say, you know, send it to me?
Yeah, depending on the context that would be used. And Geoffrey, are you okay with that? Or?
Just contact us and we can work out whether it's appropriate, you know, how we're going to handle it, whether it's appropriate or not. And
sure.
Who owns what?
I will also mention that this webinar is being recorded, so it can be played back on demand. Well, we are nearing the top of the hour, and I don't see any further.
May I ask?
Yes. Oh, please, yes.
Hi. Oh, sorry. I may have missed this. I had to step away for a minute, but this is such an interesting area of study, and I am just wondering if you had an opportunity to also look at the cemeteries, if any archaeological work has been done, if so, or in the surrounding area. Thank you.
I missed a word or two there. Where were you asking about the archaeological work?
Well, I'm wondering if you have looked at if there are any cemeteries that are attached to the different structures, the different churches that you showed, and also if there has been any kind of archaeological work done around there to to get more information about them.
Well, I'm not, Michael, as I live 350 miles away from a lot of the rural churches. So as Michael Retka really knows more of the rural churches, some of them do have adjacent cemetery.
Yeah, a good example of that is St. Mary of Czestochowa in Delano, where the cemetery is right behind the church. And that is an example of some of the founding families are still active in the parish there, and just having been to Poland myself, it's as if a Polish village is in this area of Minnesota, and they're a relatively small parish, about 100 families, but it's there haven't been any archaeological digs that I know of. But in going to some of these small parishes, you really do get a sense of the multi-generational cohesion and as evidenced by the so I had an occasion of going to St. Mary of Delano for a meeting not long ago, and one of the parishioners remarked that his grandfather laid the bricks to the church, and walking in the cemetery afterward, I see that his ancestors are right there, and so there is this very strong multi-generational connection.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So maybe what I also should have asked is also if there has been any archaeological work done where the settlers lived, that is, their homes, because now in many parts of the country, there is interest in how people used to live their everyday lives, what they were like. And they determined this by digging up, the kind of dishes, the kind of pottery, the kind of things, whether it was medicine bottles or whether it was prescription things, or whether those were other ways where they were, not able to go to a doctor, so they used their own medications. You can determine a lot of things just by looking at the garbage that people left behind, actually. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm a historical archaeologist by background, and we got started in all this because looking at ethnic identity in archaeological sites. So more work has been done because driven by the Department of Transportation and legal projects, which have legal requirements about protecting archaeological resources, is not unlikely, if you were to do some searching, that somebody has already excavated the site of a Polish farmstead.
One area in Minnesota where there might be some potential, it's kind of recently been documented that the first settlers in Minnesota may have come as early as 1827 along the banks of the Mississippi, before St. Paul was founded. These would have been immigrants from Manitoba who originally were British soldiers in the War of 1812. During the 1830s, there were some treaty negotiations with the Ojibwe and other tribes, and these settlers were sort of kicked out. And there's some documentation. The original site where these settlers were was covered over in the 1960s by a government road project along the banks of the Mississippi. So perhaps they're there. There remains. Someone would have to dig to find out.
Right, because in many places around here, this is the Washington, D.C. area, they have archaeologists who actually go to the site and then, do some kind of research and digging up to find what was there before they can start building roads or anything else, actually.
Yeah, good point.
There are some follow-up comments in the chat to this subject.
Okay. I see. Yes, Frogtown, Minnesota, which was originally a French settlement, is later became a Polish settlement. Yeah, but we're happy to follow up in any way, or if you have additional questions to follow up as needed. Okay, Neil, you're muted.
So I am. Well, one more comment has come in the chat, and I think that can speak for all of us on this presentation. Dziękuję bardzo. Great presentation. I think that I don't see any more questions or comments. So on behalf of all of us gathered worldwide, we'd like to thank you, Mark and Geoffrey, for this fascinating presentation. And we will be, and as you say, you've invited people to contact you with further questions if they have them. That said, the hour is getting a little bit late for our Polish listeners. So perhaps this is a good time to sign off. Thanks to our presenters. Thanks to our audience. And should there be further webinars that we host in future during this year, we will be in touch with you. For the time being, stay well, stay healthy, and have a good weekend. Bye.